The situation is evolving into what might be the greatest strategic blind spot in modern American diplomacy. When the White House issued a direct threat to cut off all trade with Spain on Tuesday, the goal was simple: use economic fear to force military cooperation. It was a classic move from an old playbook: threaten the pocketbook to command the battlefield. But instead of a surrender, Washington triggered something far more dangerous to its long-term influence. It triggered a spontaneous grassroots alliance of the targeted. This wasn't just a diplomatic spat. It was a total miscalculation of how sovereignty works in 2026. Spanish Foreign Minister José Manuel Álvarez made it clear that southern Spain would not become a launchpad for strikes on Iran that fall outside the United Nations Charter. This wasn't just a policy disagreement. It was a hard line drawn on sovereign soil. The response from Washington was immediate and blunt. President Donald Trump told reporters that the United States would simply cut off all trade because Spain was being terrible. He didn't just suggest a tariff, he threatened a total economic divorce. He spoke as if the U.S. could simply ignore the legal reality of Spanish command and use those bases by force if necessary. This was the opening salvo in a conflict that Washington expected to win by Tuesday afternoon. By Wednesday morning, they realized they weren't just fighting Madrid. They were fighting a global sentiment. In plain terms, the strategy was meant to isolate Spain and make them an example to the rest of Europe. It backfired within hours. Instead of Spain standing alone in the crosshairs, a groundswell of support surged from across the Atlantic. In small towns like Knowlton, Quebec, and Sault Narrows, Ontario, regular people didn't wait for a government memo to act. Valerie Butters, an artist in Quebec, reached out to Spanish citizens on social media with a simple message: "Glad to have you in our club." She wasn't talking about a trade bloc or a formal treaty. She was talking about the Châtie List, a growing group of nations that have felt the weight of American tariffs and threats of annexation. For Canadians, this felt personal. They have lived under the shadow of these threats for over a year. They have watched as Greenland and Denmark were targeted. They have felt the punch in the face of shifting trade rules and unpredictable demands. This is where the power map shifts. For decades, the global narrative was about countries competing for Washington's favor. Now, the narrative is about finding safety in numbers outside of it. When Dee Lysack in Ontario posted, "Spain, you are welcome here. We see you, we hear you," she wasn't just being polite. She was reflecting a deep-seated exhaustion felt by millions who live near the U.S. border. This isn't just a social media trend, it is a cultural shift. People in Spain responded by offering homes and recommendations to Canadians, building a digital bridge over the head of the White House. On TikTok, a single comment suggesting Canadians prioritize Spanish products over American ones gained over 68,000 likes. The movement moved from the screen to the supermarket shelf in record time. Why does this matter? Because the aggressor in this scenario has miscalculated their leverage. The threat to cut off all trade with Spain is logically hollow. Spain is a member of the European Union, which handles trade as a single, massive bloc. You cannot embargo Spain without effectively embargoing France, Germany, and Italy. While the U.S. administration might believe they hold the cards because of their naval power or dollar dominance, Spain holds the moral high ground and the legal keys to the Mediterranean. By trying to bypass the UN Charter, the U.S. didn't just alienate a middle power. It reminded every other middle power that their sovereignty is on the line. They showed the world that ally is a word that only applies when you say yes. A new alignment has begun. We are seeing the birth of a decentralized alliance where the marginalized find strength in their shared status as targets. In Canada, the political atmosphere is shifting too. Prime Minister CARNEY has tried to walk a fine line, offering support for the war with one hand while calling it a failure of the international order with the other. He knows that his population is looking at Spain and seeing a mirror. They see a country that said no to being a vassal, and they are rewarding that courage with their wallets and their words. The Canadian public is essentially dragging their government toward a more defiant stance, sparked by the sight of Spain standing its ground. The geography of this conflict is fascinating. You have the Rota and Morón bases in Spain, which are vital for U.S. operations in the Middle East and Africa. By threatening Spain, the US is effectively threatening its own logistics. It is a form of strategic self-sabotage. If Madrid decides to further restrict access, the US military footprint in the region shrinks overnight. Spain knows this. They know that while they might lose some trade in the short term, the US stands to lose its most important stationary aircraft carriers in the Mediterranean. It is a game of chicken where the person threatening to crash the car is the one who needs the car the most. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez understood this perfectly. He didn't blink. He didn't offer a half-hearted apology or a measured response. He stood before his nation and declared that Spain would not be complicit in something that is bad for the world, just out of fear. He chose values over reprisals. In doing so, he didn't just protect his bases, he became a symbol for a global audience that is tired of being punched in the face by unilateral demands. This is the birth of what we might call the coalition of the bullied. It is not based on shared geography but on a shared refusal to be coerced. The map of the world is being redrawn, but not by generals or trade negotiators. It is being redrawn by people like Valerie Butters and D. Lysac, and the thousands of Spaniards who replied to them. They realize that the club of the threatened is actually larger, more resilient, and more interconnected than the power threatening them. They are building a world where the response to a trade threat isn't a stock market crash, but an offer of maple syrup and a list of local hotels. It is a world where sovereignty is defended not just with missiles, but with solidarity. The data is available to everyone, but the perspective belongs to you. Make your own call. If you believe that sovereignty is more than just a word on a map, and you want to see how this new global alliance of unlikely allies unfolds, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.